So welcome. You know, Ellen introduced me. Just for those who are listening to this recording, my name is Renee Norden. I'm the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association. I've had a long time working with youth, but also worked for a time for our local community service board in emergency mental health and in suicide prevention. And I'm really happy to share this topic with you all today because it's so important. It's one of those things that none of us can avoid, right? You know, say if you have a fear of snakes, you can avoid seeing snakes, right? But all of us age. In fact, my father, who is a retired orthopedic surgeon, told me that reentry, he says, begins at age 25, right? So we're all sort of heading back, and we'll talk about today a few of the things that are important to know. So first of all, we're going to define what really mental wellness is. A lot of people throw around words like mental health, behavioral health, things like that. Today, we're going to be working on mental health and how it also interacts with body and spirit. We're going to get a better understanding of what changes as we age. And then once we get through those things, we're going to talk about 5 factors that I believe help you stay mentally well as you age. First off, mental wellness. This is a definition by the World Health Organization. It is, I'll read it just so that we can hear it out loud. It's a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stressors of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. The long and short of it is really your ability to live, laugh, love, and learn, right? When we are well, we are happy to live, happy to interact with those around us, happy to form relationships, learn new things. You know, that whole thing, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I don't believe in that. And so continue to challenge yourselves and then also find humor in life. There we go. What has impacted this is the pandemic. We know that the pandemic has had a detrimental effect on mental wellness. We have seen a rise in anxiety and depression. It's also impacted our ability to connect, not only with friends and family, but also with our healthcare providers. I don't know if any of you all out there during the pandemic, during the lockdown, didn't see your doctors, or maybe you weren't comfortable meeting with your doctors via Zoom, right? Or making connections with friends and family, even in organizations you might volunteer with. You know, I've been in a lot of Zoom meetings. In fact, when I started my position here, I was in my office, probably the only person in the building for a long time. And so, you know, that the pandemic, we have lingering effects of it now. And we're going to have to contend with the ripple effects of the pandemic for years to come. So when we're talking about mental wellness, we really need to pay attention to that interconnection of mind, body, and spirit. And we'll talk about specific examples. But sort of the sweet spot in the middle of all that is where our true selves are. And when we speak of mind, we're talking not only about the physical brain, but also how we think. The body, of course, is more than, is that physical part of our essence. And then the spirit we'll talk more about as well. So thinking about the mind, right? We're talking about your brain, how you think, your emotions. And there really are 4 functions that go along with that. So the first is cognitive health. It's that ability to think clearly. Now I will tell you that, leaving your kitchen to go into your family room and not remembering why you went there. Okay. That happens to everyone. You are not alone. Your brain is still functioning. You'll notice that if you're stressed, it's harder to remember why you moved between room and room. The only thing I can tell you is I've been told that if you go back through the doorway and come back again, you might remember. something about portals and how we think. But that cognitive health is also the ability to remember. You know, as my mother sort of fell into her Alzheimer's, it was amazing to watch because she remembered things that she hadn't remembered in years from when like a much younger time, but had trouble remembering the things that happened yesterday. Okay. Our motor functions, that is, you know, it is connected to our body, but really that the ability to, you know, move and hand-eye coordination and dexterity and that balance. Balance is so important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but, you know, that's why so many of the senior programs, the older adult programs, include balance work. Because of course, if you lose your balance and fall, other bad things can happen. Emotion. Sometimes, you know, it's that ability to understand when somebody's expressing emotion, what they're really meaning. We know that Zoom calls and texting and things like that, it's hard to interpret those emotions and then determine how to respond. But a healthy brain is able to respond appropriately with emotion. And then the tactile function, how we actually feel, like, you know, are we feeling correctly? Pressure, pain, how we deal with those feelings. Temperature. My sister, for example, is always cold. You know, I bet if I were to go to her house right now, she would be wearing a sweater, right? Her brain interprets temperature differently than mine does. All right. As we age, things will challenge our mental wellness. The loss of family and friends, losing connections, right? Maybe you've been working most of your life and now you're retired and you don't know like what your purpose is now. You're maybe floundering. I think it's amazing. My mother, for example, she retired and lasted in retirement about, I would say, 4.5 months before she got a volunteer position where she was at least working 3 days a week. It could also be a role change where maybe you're used to being the head of household, but now you've moved in with family. And does that still make you the head of the household or not? You know, those roles are unclear. If you are in, maybe have had a position where people have, you know, paid attention to what you've said, and now you're not in that position anymore. It's hard to find that purpose, you know, a place where you feel valued. Doesn't mean you can't, but you might have to do a little work to find it. Then we also have an increase in physical health concerns. Now, people age differently. And so some, unfortunately, and we'll talk more about this, you know, genetics play a factor. And maybe like in part of my family, arthritis is a big deal. You know, that's just something we've been dealt. But those chronic health conditions can sort of wear a person down and affect that mental wellness. We also found great, you know, research fodder. Lots of research has been done about the pandemic and the loneliness. You know, before the pandemic, there were older citizens that were lonely. Maybe they no longer drove. Maybe they were living by themselves in their homes. But that isolation, the entire population really didn't feel it. But after people experienced it themselves during the pandemic, there's been a great fervor in addressing social isolation for our older members of our community. And then financial issues. You know, not only maybe you've retired and now you're relying on your savings, or, you know, with the increase of the cost of living or inflation and how the market is behaving can all cause challenges. And that can weigh on our mental wellness. All right. There are two of the most common mental health challenges that older adults face. Now, I don't want anyone to think that, first off, these two conditions are bound to happen as you age. It's not true. Anyone who thinks that depression is a natural part of aging, no. Does it happen? Yes. But it doesn't happen to the majority of older Americans, okay? Only about 20% of the population of older adults will experience depression. All right. Now, depression is a little different than just having a down day or a down couple of days. It's a period of depression. And unfortunately, because we are so connected with our mind, body, and spirit, depression can also cause physical pain and physical health problems. Okay. Untreated, unfortunately, only about 40% of those with these conditions actually seek treatment. Some only go and tell their primary care physicians. And for depression to really be healed well, if it's good to go to a professional and actually talk about it. Okay. Untreated, it could lead to suicide. And of course, we don't want that. Now, if you've had a couple of down days, talking to friends and connecting that way can help pull you out of that depression. But if the depression has lasted a significant amount of time, I think it's best to go see a professional. They are great members of our community. And the other a positive factor from the pandemic is that telemental health has advanced 20 years or more. So if it's a problem with transportation, there are ways of talking to a counselor through your computer. The other thing to think about is anxiety. It is the other most common, but again, only about 40% of our older population will experience a mental health challenge like this. And anxiety is quite different than stress, okay? Stress is sort of tied to one thing. You're worried about what you're going to make for the church social. You're worried about a doctor's appointment coming up, okay? That is stress, right? Anxiety is pervasive. It covers everything. You're worried about the world in general. You might check locks multiple times before you go to bed. Your anxiety makes you pull away from others. Less older adults experience anxiety than depression, but it's still a factor. Again, it is not typical. You know, that stereotypical worried little old lady is not what most older adults experience. Anxiety and depression are both highly treatable. 85% of all reach recovery with treatment. The other just might need what I call sort of tune-ups. They go back more often to see that counselor. The other thing that isn't a mental health concern, but can impact you, of course, is grief. It is very typical as you age to lose family members, to lose friends. People experiencing grief, first of all, experience it in all different ways. And so for some, you might see the typical crying, sad. Others, they might get angry, aggressive, have a short temper, short patient, aren't as patient as they used to be. If it progresses, it can go into either anxiety or depression. People will lose interest in what they're doing. Sometimes grief happens in that maybe there's a death of a loved one and the person seems fine, but a couple months out, all of a sudden they're having a hard time. No one experiences grief the same way. The wonderful thing about grief is that through talking to people around you, sharing information about the person you've lost or what you've lost, grief gets better, okay? Unfortunately, if we don't talk about it, if we keep it all bundled inside, it'll start bubbling out, right? We have a great resource here in Fauquier that will serve anyone from any county. Spiritual Care Ministries would love to help you through your grief process. And so I can put that in the chat later. All right. And so that's the end of the mental wellness, right? So now going on to our body. Can anyone tell me, unmute and tell me who this gorgeous man is over here? I hear Ellen nodding.
Jack LaLanne.
Jack LaLanne, you're right. I have many of my friends who he has been their hero forever. And so Jack LaLanne is a perfect example of how, yes, your body, due to some things that you have no control over, right, genetics. We know that our skin cells don't replicate as quickly. That's what can cause the wrinkles. Takes longer to do things. Jack LaLanne's the perfect example of how you can combat that, right? How by continuing to make your body function, right? Even if it's challenging, we want to keep moving. So if you're an individual that might have trouble moving, the trick is to keep moving and not hold yourself accountable to maybe what you used to be able to do. I was talking to an older gentleman and we were talking about movement, and he's like, I don't want to do it. I used to be able to run 3 miles a day and now I have trouble walking. It's like, I know, but yeah, I'm not asking you to go out and run 3 miles, but walking would be a great way, right? Walking helps you with that balance, helps you keep your bone density, your muscle mass. It also helps in healing. So if you're able to move, if you're able to, take care of your body in that way, it's easier to heal, right? And so even though it's challenging, I would encourage you to keep going. Even if you're only starting like walking across the room, add a step. They're great videos and all that on TV. PBS has some great series on fitness and flexibility that you can tape or record, I guess I should say, and then you can use them anytime you need to. Okay. And so that third circle, that spirituality, older generations are much more likely to consider themselves spiritual. It's the younger generation that we're seeing less religion in, but still spirituality across the board. The nice thing about spirituality is it gives you hope. It's a comfort. I still, when I'm in church and I hear the hymns, it brings you comfort. To be worshiping with people around you can also provide comfort. I know that the pandemic has been a challenge because of that, and people are sort of zooming into different services and things like that, and church group meetings. Churches are open, so some who feel comfortable do still attend. Not only is it a religious thing, but it's that connection piece, right? I laugh, a number of years ago, my husband and I were invited to a Baptist church function here in Warrenton. I had grown up Catholic, so I was used to sort of your religious commitment on Sundays was an hour. Well, I had planned my Sunday. We went to this wonderful service. It started at 8:30, and at noon, we were still in church. I was starving to death, but it was amazing to me that for that religion, that church was an all day long thing. And so after the service, we went to the meeting hall and we had a fabulous lunch. But it's that social interaction. It also provides way of connecting people from different generations. And then when we do need support, there are people there to support us. So thinking about those three things that are so interconnected, how is your mental wellness? Think about that for a second. Out of that combination, is one of those circles maybe you aren't giving enough attention to? Maybe another circle is taking up too much attention? Really assess where you are. And then think about where you'd like to be. Because there are ways of improving mental wellness. And it starts with you. So thinking about it, there really are 5 key factors to improve health and wellness, right? And they are connect, contribute, care, cheer, and choose. And we're going to get into each of these individually. So thinking about connect and connection. Research has shown that social connection is the greatest protective factor for health, physical health, emotional health, mental health. It is essential to your well-being. The pandemic has also shown us that it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, you still need that connection. One of my good friends who thought the pandemic was going to be the best thing ever because she was such an introvert found a place where she needed people. So much so that she and another friend of mine who had been alone during the pandemic created a whole contract so that if we had to go into lockdown again, they could be together. Right? There was a big research study done, and it actually proved that we underestimate what happens when we reach out. That it actually does much more than we thought it would. Okay? It has the highest impact. Even spontaneous reaching out has a greater positive impact than planned. And I know that sounds a little funny. Like if you and a friend meet every Wednesday for coffee, that's a great thing. But if all of a sudden you were to surprise that friend with, hey, let's go to the movies, it would have more of an impact than your regular meetings. Okay? And when I say that connection, it doesn't have to be a long connection. It can be short. It can be a 2-minute conversation. Now, it can be longer than that, but still, it has the highest impact. Right? We need to connect as human beings. And not only does that connection help the person we are connecting with, but it helps us. So thinking about connection and connecting, anyone have any ideas on how you could do that? You want to just unmute and share?
Hi, this is Norma. During the pandemic, when we were not getting together in person, I sponsored various bring your own lunches to Rady Park. So I would go early and clean off the picnic tables and the seats and put down a tablecloth and maybe have some fresh flowers in the middle and just wait for people to show up. And so I would only have 3, 4, or 5 people at a time so we could spread out on the picnic benches. And that seemed to be a lifeline to a lot of people.
That's wonderful, Norma. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other ideas?
Renee, I started walking during the pandemic with a friend of mine. And what I found, we would go early in the mornings. And what I found was I was trying to, fill in my exercise because I wasn't going to the gym anymore. But then we would talk the whole time and, really talk. We walked like 4 miles, so we would really talk. And what we kind of both realized after a while was it wasn't just the walking anymore. It was that social connection that you talk about and is really very vital. And I think you're absolutely right. You don't even realize the impact.
Thank you, Ellen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Hi, I'm cordless. I did it before the virus too. I just always did it. I always collect thinking of you cards and just saying the cards that say hi or hug. I'm sending a hug your way, and I send them to people, especially if they're, like they lose a loved one or something. I always make sure I have one for those people, and it every couple of months or every other month or every other week, depending on how it sounds like they feeling. They get one or more often. Sometimes they get one not so often, but I just always do that. And I have a friend that always tells me, I don't understand, well, I can't say I don't understand, but she keeps telling me that every time the card comes, it's when she's at a time when she's quite low, and it just picks her up. So, and I can't say that I know something ahead of time or anything. It's just that, I haven't sent, Zelda a card in a while. And then I put the card in the mail. So,
so wonderful. Any other ideas that someone would like to share? Okay.
Renee, I was just going to jump in and say too that I know during the pandemic, a lot of different agencies were even AARP, I think, had like those telephone trees
Mhm.
where people were just, calling to check in on people. And I think, it's not quite the same as the person to person, but I think it definitely helped.
Well, Ellen, I also remember a story that you shared
Oh,
that you were helping with calling about the COVID vaccines.
right.
And the other people that were there calling would get through like 30 people, and you would get through like 3,
Yeah.
just because you were having such a good time talking with them, which I think is a fabulous thing. So
Yeah.
let's look at these ideas. So reaching out to friends and family, you all have already shared this. Understand that it might feel daunting, right? Especially old friends. When you get that, oh, I wonder what so-and-so is doing now. I always treat that as like, wait, I need to reach out to them. Okay. I would encourage you, if you keep like a planner or something, or maybe by your phone, write a list of people that you would like to connect with. Okay. Because all the research has shown that this doesn't have to be an hour, a 2-hour, a 3-hour event. It can be a 3-minute phone call or a 5-minute phone call. But if you already have the list of names with their telephone numbers right there, then when you have that moment, you can just reach out immediately, because sometimes we talk ourselves out of things. Well, what happens if they don't want to talk to me? I guarantee they do. Now, it might be that you have to like say, this is Joe. Remember, we were at such and such together. That's okay to say. Doesn't mean they've forgotten you, but understand that, I had a woman reach out to me today, and she asked me if we were ready to do something now. And I had no idea what she was talking about. Right? It was fine for me to say, sure, but who is this? And what are you talking about? Right? Because our lives are busy. So sometimes we don't remember things. If you can't connect in person, then it's still great to connect virtually. But I will tell you, if you're virtual, you have to ask and share more. Right? When you're sitting across from somebody or next to somebody, you naturally pick up how they're doing. Right? But virtually, it's hard. So ask, how are you doing with this? I found it was really hard because of this. Have you found that? Right? You have to be a little vulnerable. And then I'd also encourage you to join new organizations and programs. Pick up a new hobby. At some point, I'm going to learn how to knit. Not anytime soon. I'd also like to learn some Spanish. So I am going to join those things. I think the next thing I'm going to do is pickleball. I already have when they practice. I'm going to force my husband. I just can't do it in this heat. I have to wait till it cools down a little bit. All right. But not only is this connection beneficial for who you're reaching out to, it's beneficial for yourself as well. All right. What I know is that when we start feeling low and isolated, I want to encourage you to immediately get up and look at that list and call someone, or make plans to go see someone, or walk out and see your neighbor. Because what happens with those feelings of isolation and feeling low and sad is they spiral, right? It gets worse instead of better. So reach out to a grandchild. Okay. And so that's the connect. Moving on, and that mail, just like Corliss said, I mean, think about it. When was the last time you got a handwritten note in the mail? Right? I got one probably 6 months ago, and it was an event. It was fabulous. If you are listening and maybe have younger children and have older adults that don't live nearby, best thing to do, have your younger child draw a picture, put it in the envelope and mail it. It's amazing what refrigerators your child's artwork can be displayed on, right? And I will tell you, if that child then walks into a kitchen and sees their artwork displayed, again, it has that beneficial ripple, which is fabulous. All right, so that's connecting. Moving on to contribute. I will tell you that I had a hard time with this word, because when people say contribute, everyone thinks of money. I don't want to let you all off that easy, right? Because when we give give an organization $5 or $10 or whatever it is, it doesn't really, the ripple, that beneficial ripple effect doesn't really last that long. But if you can give your gift of time or your expertise, right, and do meaningful activities, you'll feel better. Your mind will run better. Your body will feel better, right? You want to be able to give back to others. A lot of people are like, well, why? I'm feeling horrible. Why would I do that? Because when you do that, you feel better, right? It has that positive ripple effect. And you see that, you know, without your help, things wouldn't have happened as it did. And you can do this by yourself or in groups. You know, if your neighbor is having the same concerns you are, drag your neighbor with you to whatever you're going to volunteer with. Okay. And so let's talk about.
Can I say something, please? Can I say something, please?
Sure.
I've had this, when I volunteered in the past, it's frequently been the case that they put me someplace doing something alone. And I will not ever do that again. I won't do it. I just won't. I have to be with other people or I won't volunteer. That's it.
Jeffrey, that's a fabulous observation. I think that's a great thing because you're right. Volunteering, you need to be with other people.
Yep.
See how that contribution feels, right?
Yep.
And so what other ideas do you all have? What have you all done in the past or thinking about doing that would help give back to your community?
Hi, Corliss again.
Hello, Corliss.
I feed the homeless twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month. I have a schedule, you know, when I'm expected to be there, and we make sandwiches to give out to the homeless, because we go out in Norfolk, we go to a spot on the street, and then the homeless people, they come and they line up because they know where to go and what time and what day and all that. And I also go to the food bank and volunteer once a week.
That's wonderful.
And I brought my friend. You were talking about bringing somebody with you. I was there telling one of my friends about it, and she lives in Norfolk. I live in Chesapeake, but and she now is volunteering at the food bank along with me.
That is wonderful. See, it works that way. It's that positive ripple effect. That's great. Any other ideas?
This is Norma again. To the gentleman that talked about being stuck in a one-off position of volunteering, you know, Marie Kondo, who wrote about the organizational lady who says if something doesn't bring you joy, then you need to find it in another home. I feel the same way about my volunteer activity. So I've done a lot of volunteering over the years, but right now I'm a pet rep for the local hospital, where I go in with a friend and her Sheltie, and we're with pet therapy program. So we're a dynamic duo, and the joy that brings patients, I can't even tell you, because you know, when people are in the hospital, that's when they're at their lowest, and they may have had bad news, be in a lot of pain. And when I ask, would you like a visit from a pet therapy dog, even if they say, okay, I guess, as soon as that dog hits their bed and they touch that dog, it's amazing. So that it brings me great joy, but I know it brings other people more joy than I receive. So that's what I would encourage you to find, something that brings you joy and brings joy to other people.
Thank you, Norma.
I have a dog. He gives me joy. But for volunteering, that's something. Yeah.
That's fabulous. All right, so let's look at. All right, so yes, you know, volunteering is a fabulous thing. Again, we talked about how you could do it by yourself or get a group together. If you're in this area, in the 5-county area in Virginia, the PATH Volunteer Hub has great opportunities to volunteer. And you know how I said you can also share your expertise? Maybe you were a bookkeeper or a healthcare provider or something like that, and you want to still, maybe you were a nurse. Now you don't want to continue to be a nurse, but maybe your nursing skills can help in your volunteer capacity. You know, I encourage you to, volunteer at your library in many different ways. So you could be a buddy reader You could help shelve books. You could run book groups, book clubs. Find something, as Norma said, that gives you joy. Maybe if you aren't into organized activities, understand that you can also contribute by making cookies for neighbors, getting a community potluck together. Maybe you and your neighbor need to go grocery shopping. You can go together, right? Maybe your neighbor doesn't drive and you do. So you could take her with you as you go to do your errands so she can do her errands. Right. But yeah, as everyone has shared, giving of yourself, of your expertise, of your time is a great protective factor for yourself, but also brings joy to yourself and others. Moving on to our next C, the care for yourself. And care can be more than just physical care. We're talking emotional as well, right? Mental health as well. But it's important. It's important to take care of yourself. It's important to go to those doctor's appointments. Get your vaccinations. We know that people who live under stress for a long time, it can cause physical illness. So know what those stressors are and do something to get rid of them. Maybe you've been in a battle with one of your relatives, maybe a sibling, for so long, you might not even remember why there was a disagreement. Maybe it's time to bury the hatchet and let it go. We already talked about keep moving. And I think, the older generation had an idea that self-care was selfish. We'll talk more about self-care, but it is definitely not selfish. When you're flying in an airplane and the oxygen masks fall from the sky or from, above you, the flight attendant always says, put your mask on first before you help others with theirs. And that's what you have to do in self-care, because if you don't, you're going to end up run down. And so we need to make sure we continue to feed our souls. So thinking about caring for yourself, what ideas do you all have? How do you all right now take care of yourselves to sort of feed your soul, feed your energy?
Exercise.
Exercise is a great one. It releases those positive endorphins, helps build bone density. Other ideas?
Being around other people.
Definitely. Okay, let's look at what I have. Okay, get a yearly physical. And vaccinations are very important. Help stimulate your immune system. We also want to go to the dentist at least once a year. If it's difficult for, maybe you don't have dental insurance or you're on a fixed income and can't afford dental care, the Fauquier Free Clinic here in Warrenton has dental care. They are also doing a Piedmont Smiles event in October, where they're going to see, I think, 250 people at Fauquier Hospital doing all sorts of procedures and everything. So if that's something that maybe you've had a tooth that's been bothering you forever, make sure that you sign up for that. Jeffrey already shared about exercising with friends. Ellen shared about walking and talking. And then also, I invite you to take time off. Now, that isn't always a vacation, but maybe there's something that's been concerning you. I encourage you to schedule a time, if that's something you need to worry about it. And the rest of the time, give yourself some time off, right? Sometimes when we concentrate on something so much, it doesn't allow it to sort of move on, okay?
In the chat, we have read a book.
Read a book is great. Especially, there's something called bibliotherapy, and that's the practice of basically assigning people books that help them with whatever's going on in their life. So if you are having a challenge and you finding a book that might have somebody experiencing that challenge in it actually helps you process that. So for an example, if you're a person who maybe is suffering from some anxiety symptoms, if there's a character in a book that in the book they show positive coping with anxiety, it helps you internalize that. Now, it isn't the whole story. It isn't like, now there are books out there, Anxiety for Dummies, that whole book series. There's a book called Anxiety for Dummies. If you really want to know what anxiety is all about, get the book. It'll tell you it. A great motivational speaker who in his childhood and young adolescence found out that he had bipolar disorder. He said the best thing he ever did was became an expert in bipolar disorder, because then no longer was he a victim of his disease. He knew what it was and how he could help himself. Right? Okay.
In the chat, we have keep a journal.
Mm-hmm. Keeping a journal is fabulous. I have to say that I'm not very good at it. But I have a great time when I go back and read entries that I have put in the journal from years ago. It does show me how, what I used to confront or deal with, and what I've, sort of come through. But great suggestions in the chat. All right, moving on. So we have.
Oh, sorry, Renee. There is another comment in the chat that I wanted to read out because maybe you can respond to this. This is from Ruth, and she says, what about age discrimination? I have actually encountered this in volunteer situations. Leave the situation, yes, but how to care for oneself in such rejections.
I think
that is a real thing.
It is a real thing. And what I want you to be careful with is how you assign that word rejection. Because does that person in that situation, you only are rejected if you allow yourself to feel that way. So I would encourage you in a situation like that to know that that person doesn't know what they're talking about, right? Doesn't know how powerful older adults can be, how their expertise can be of so much help. And in all actuality, kind of like Jeffrey talked about in those volunteer situations where he was by himself, finding a place that appreciates you for the person you are. And so, if you do live in this area, I would encourage you to reach out to Lynn Lawrenson, who is the head of that PATH volunteer program, and say, this is what I'm looking for. Who do you think I should reach out to? Because she interacts with all those organizations. And then what you can do is later on, after you've worked for another organization, you can go back to that person and say, too bad you didn't keep me or made it difficult for me, because I could have done so much for you, like I've done for Aging Together, like I've done for the library. Okay, that's a little vindictive, but you don't have to do that. Find the place that fills your soul, because if you're volunteering for a person who feels that way about older people, you'll never feed your soul at that place. The reason this picture is here is because we want to make sure we continue to fill the pitcher and not just empty out of it. All right, moving on.
I just want to say one thing. When I, got as far as volunteering alone, what I decided was, if I'm going to do something, if I'm alone, I'm going to have a part-time job or something, an extra job, and make money. I'm going to at least get something from it.
Right.
It has to be something, not nothing. Mm-hmm. I care about the cause, but not enough to do it alone. No.
Right.
No.
I think that's great, Jeff. And having a part-time job, I think, is fabulous. As long as that job isn't like weighing you down.
Right.
Okay. Cheer. Now, years ago, when I was newly in my marriage, I took a class in choosing your emotions. And my husband thought that was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard. Okay. Understand when I say choosing your emotions, it is sort of emotional regulation. It isn't sort of, it is emotional regulation. So yes, say you have a significant loved one die. In choosing your emotions, I'm not saying you can choose to be happy. No, I'm saying, do you need to be like inconsolable, rolling around on the floor? Or is there another place to be more comfortable, right? Or is that you're still sad? We want to make sure we're choosing that glass half full, right? Because we know that these positive, and I don't want to assign, like, it's okay to be sad sometimes, right? In fact, if you were never sad, you wouldn't know the difference between happy and sad. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to be happy 100% of the time, because that is not realistic. Content would be wonderful, okay? Working on that emotional regulation is that ability to take a second, right? And maybe we're the type of person who in the past, something had happened and you immediately blow up. I invite you to step back for a second and take a breath and then respond. Allow whatever is percolating to settle before jumping in. We know that having that attitude of gratitude not only affects you, but those around you. It keeps you healthier. It's, again, it has its own ripple effect. Okay. And we know that those who have a positive mindset have less health concerns. And also choosing sort of what you talk about. Think about when you get together with other people. I would encourage you to kind of observe what people talk about. Are you talking about things that are feeding your soul? Are you talking about things that pull you down? Are you talking about, the wonderful card you got in the mail, or how your knee aches more and more every day? Because we know that by choosing not only your emotions, but what you talk about can help bring your mood up. So thinking about cheer ideas, what ideas do you all have to help improve our moods, to help us put us in that place of gratitude?
Norma again. Sorry, but I am outspoken, so I don't know if you can read this or not, or if it comes up backwards, but it says happy by choice.
Mm-hmm.
And this right in front of me on my writing desk, and that was from a book by Sean Achor, Achor, and he has a wonderful, wonderful TED Talk. If you are down and you can't smile or laugh out loud at that, then I think you better check your pulse. But I try to remind myself that, and I do believe that happiness is a choice, and certainly we all have terrible things that happen to us in life. No one can escape that. So it's just how we choose to look at it, and what can I learn from this, and how can it be a growing experience for me. So that's how I try to do that. And secondly, the news. People tend to turn on the news first thing in the morning, which is a terrible way to start your day. Have it on while we're eating, so our digestion is hindered. And then at bedtime, whoa, good. We have all these terrible things happening and going through our brain. So I don't watch any network news. I read online what I choose to read. So it's not in my face, but it's something that I'm choosing to read. Mm-hmm. So I do stay up on stuff, but I don't watch any network news.
Thank you, Norma. Yes, that putting yourself in a position to be positive. It's not what happens to us, but what we do with that really matters. And yes.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Cordless again. I have a band on my arm, so you can't see it, but it says "Smile, God loves you," and mm-hmm. I wear this all the time. And I always telling people that even though it looks awful now, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You never know how long it's going to take for you to get to that light, but you have to push yourself toward the light. Mm-hmm. And when it rains and it messes up your plan for that day, now we were outside, and now we have to grab all the food and everything and run inside because the rain came. But I'm not upset, because I say, oh, good, now the flowers and the vegetables and everything are going to get a drink. So thank you, God. But it's easy to, I guess it's easy to say it, but a lot of people feel like, no, now my plan is all messed up, and things are, everything went downhill. No, it's good for somebody. It may not be good for you today, but whatever the kind of weather and all the things that you can't have, that you don't have any control over, That's what I always say. If I have control and I can, then I'm not going to worry until I can fix it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't have no control over it, there ain't no sense in me stressing over it, because that's not gonna fix it. It can't be fixed. Or it can be fixed, but next week or tomorrow. So, but today we're gonna, enjoy today. So, yeah.
Thank you.
For me, it's easy, but it's not. But I think I always had the feeling, whatever the word is. I always feel good inside my own body. So,
okay.
It's because I always felt like bad things couldn't happen to me anyway. But, and to me, when things happen, I don't call them really bad. I just say, oh, I got to get out of this, or I got to fix this, or I got to pay for that, or whatever it is.
Exactly. And so a lot
of times traveling, because my daughter, she sets up all the trips. And I just make sure I'm ready and with the bag packed on time.
That's perfect. Very good, Corliss. And so, thinking about that, maybe if you aren't like Corliss, maybe if she, you didn't know that, you can practice it. And so let's look at other ideas. Okay. So we want to interrupt that negative spiral. We've talked about that. Norma alluded to this a little bit about, watching the news at night. Definitely not a great choice. But starting a gratitude journal, and just as you're going to sleep, write down a few things that you're grateful for. It's amazing how that can improve your experience. And then when you first wake up, instead of doing the body inventory of what hurts, think about it, something that excites you about the day, even if it's just the sun on your face or the rain on your head. And then the other thing I'd encourage you to do is make a self-care jar. Okay. Now the trick to the self-care jar is you have to put it together. And I just used a little old mason jar. You have to put it together when you aren't feeling low. And then you can put things that help you feel better. Now the trick is to this jar that once you open it, you have to do whatever the little piece of paper you've put in there tells you to. So this says, meet a friend for a walk. So I would then call a friend and go for a walk. But put anything in here, read a book, go out for coffee, make cookies, anything that makes you feel better. And that way, when you do have that low moment, you can just reach into your self-care jar and you'll feel better. Okay. You can also put those activities that will help with your mood. There's a little example of a self-care jar, so you don't have to put a little ribbon or anything on it. Ellen, is there anything in the chat about other cheer ideas?
Well, making a list of things that you're grateful for. Yes. Yeah. And I'll just add to that. There's some really great, like sort of mindfulness apps that are available that you can have on your phone that, can be really helpful too, if you're feeling kind of low.
Thank you. All right. And so the choose. All right. A lot of times we think we don't have choice. You always have choice. You might not be the choices you want to have, but you will always have choice. And so if you can or you can think about choice instead of just choosing willy-nilly, it will benefit you as a whole person. So things like eating well, staying hydrated. Staying hydrated is really important, especially as we age, because our body has trouble maintaining that hydration. So we want to stay hydrated. And if we get dehydrated, a lot of you can have people who get very forgetful, sort of, even become, not knowing where they are. And it's dehydration, right? And if we aren't hydrated, we can also lead to urinary tract infections, which also can do, just impacts everything. So we want to stay well hydrated. We want to avoid alcohol and tobacco. As we age, our bodies handle those substances differently. Plus, if we're on any medications, that interaction can be problematic. And then really be careful of over-medicating. I have one of those little pill boxes at home that keeps me, with the day of the week. I know they even have them for multiple times during the day. And so I'd encourage you to do that. get moving. And then also remember to make choices. Any ideas on how to help you make healthy choices? Let me see what my ideas are. All right, we talked about eating fruits and vegetables. Avoid the mindless eating. I don't know how many of you all like take a bag of potato chips or Doritos or Fritos, whatever your favorite is, and you watch TV. And then all of a sudden you realize that the whole bag is gone. Or the whole thing of cookies is gone. If you want to do that, bring a thing of grapes or bring those little carrots, something that if you mindlessly eat them, it can only benefit you. I also encourage you to put like fruits or veggies in your water. Some people are like, that's silly. I will tell you that studies have shown you drink more water because of it. And cucumber water actually tastes good. I don't know about the other vegetables. I know about cucumber water. We talked about the interaction with medication. Also, I want to encourage you to talk about necessary medications with your doctor. My husband's mother was considerably older when I met her. She had my husband when she was 45. And so she was very confused, couldn't remember a lot. And it turned out that she had been on medications for 30 years that were not medically necessary. What was amazing is we went and talked to the doctor and he told us what medicines she could come off of. So we took her off of that. And it was like she was 20 years, her memory was back. She could remember people. She wasn't calling us every 5 minutes. So really look at those medications and, the ones that are medically necessary, continue to take those. Don't say, oh, Renee Norton told me I didn't need these. No, take the ones that are necessary and then really try to wean off the ones that you don't really need. And then that choice, do you stay in and watch TV by yourself or do you walk outside and meet neighbors? Or do you go to like a community ice cream social? I think the Path Foundation here in Fauquier and Culpeper is doing an ice cream truck next week sometime. If you check out their site, you might be able to go get free ice cream. And then I know that Jeffrey has a dog, but also, foster a pet or adopt a pet. Something to give you, I know that pets can be work. I have 2 senior pets, so I know that well. But it also is great to have somebody wagging for you when you walk in the door, right? All right, so remember that attitude is the little thing that makes the big difference. Winston Churchill said that. And that's what this whole talk is about. It's that attitude of can do. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll see if anyone has any questions. Any questions or comments?
Well, I'll just say, let me stop that recording.